Have you ever wondered what would happen if two of the most influential spiritual figures in all of history actually met? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating text that imagines exactly that. A conversation between Jesus and Siddhartha, the man who would become the Buddha.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What would they even say to each other? Where would their ideas line up, and where would they be completely different? This isn't just some random thought experiment. It's the entire premise of a very unique piece of writing we're going to break down right now.
Okay, so the source we're looking at is a Korean text called When Jesus Met Siddhartha. Now, it's really important to get this right up front. This is a fictional dialogue, and it's written from a very specific Christian theological point of view. So our goal here isn't to debate anything, but just to explain the story and the arguments that are presented inside this one particular work.
So how does this whole conversation play out? Well, what's interesting is that it's not really a back-and-forth chat. Instead, the text is framed as a direct, one-way address from Jesus to Siddhartha Gautama.
The whole thing kicks off with, a ton of respect. The version of Jesus in this text acknowledges Siddhartha's incredible dedication, his deep meditation on what causes suffering, birth, getting old, sickness, and death, and his sincere, even life-risking quest to find a path to truth.
So before it presents its own big idea, the text first makes it clear that it understands the Buddhist path that Siddhartha created. It's kind of like it's building its case on a foundation of principles that it recognizes and respects. The text really grounds its argument by pointing to the core ideas of Buddhism. It talks about the Four Noble Truths, all about suffering and what causes it, and it mentions the Eightfold Path as the way to overcome that suffering. But see, this isn't just a random list. It's the text's way of saying, look, we understand the foundation of what you taught, and it recognizes that tireless effort to lead people toward that ultimate goal, nirvana. Now, the way nirvana is defined in this dialogue is super important. It's presented as the final destination of Siddhartha's journey, a state where you're free from suffering because of intense personal effort, your own enlightenment, your own self-realization. That definition, the fact that it's centered on what you yourself can do, is absolutely key for understanding the big contrast the text is about to make.
And here's the big pivot. After laying out one path, the text introduces what it sees as a totally, fundamentally different solution to the exact same problem of human suffering, and that is the path of the cross. The author uses this incredibly powerful prophecy from the book of Isaiah to really frame the hearts of the Christian message. This quote becomes the theological engine for this whole alternative path, one where suffering and sin aren't overcome by what you do, but are instead taken on by someone else. The idea here is that humanity isn't just stuck in a cycle of suffering, but is trapped by transgressions and iniquity, basically a moral debt that needs a solution from the outside. This slide just lays it all out, plain and simple. This is the text's central argument in a nutshell. On one side, you've got the path it attributes to Siddhartha, where every person has to carry the weight of their own karma, the sum of their actions. And on the other side, you've got the path of Jesus, where that exact same weight is presented as being carried entirely by him, offering a different kind of freedom. And that brings us right to the climax of this imagined meeting. The text presents these two paths not just as different ideas, but as a real choice that leads to two completely different outcomes. So, if nirvana is the destination of one path, what does this text say is the destination of the other? And, according to this author, what would really happen if Siddhartha and Jesus actually came face to face? This is probably the source's most direct, and you could say provocative, claim. The author asserts that if Siddhartha were to meet the resurrected Jesus, he would suddenly realize that his own lifelong struggle for enlightenment was, in the end, in vain, and that it would lead him to deep regret and remorse. And the dialogue wraps up with this direct invitation, which paraphrases a really famous verse from the Gospel of Matthew. It's presented as the ultimate offer of peace, a final call to just lay down that heavy burden of self-effort and instead accept a totally different kind of rest. All right, let's pull all of this together. We've walked through this whole hypothetical conversation, and we've seen how it builds its case, starting from a place of respect and ending at a point of really profound difference. So, if you boil it all down, the critical takeaway from this text is this. It uses this imagined meeting to argue that the universal human search for freedom from suffering, a search that Siddhartha so earnestly went on, finds its ultimate fulfillment not in self-realization, but in faith in Jesus' sacrifice. And all of this leaves us with one final big question to think about. Regardless of what you personally believe, this text is a really powerful example of how a story can be used to make a theological point. It makes you wonder, how do our foundational stories, and even modern imagined conversations like this one, end up shaping what we understand about truth, about faith, and about the ultimate purpose of our lives?